Hi everyone, welcome to today's video on Europa Universalis, the price of power. I've been asked to create a few more of these videos in which I was covering a bit more specific aspects of the rules. In this case, we will be starting with this first video where we're going to be covering the topics of exploration, colonization, and trade, since they are more or less linked. For that purpose, I am showcasing first of all a game that is a bit already advanced. I believe this is the beginning of the 5th or the 6th round of a 5 players game. And hopefully this will be the best in order to explain the different concepts. Alright, so then without further ado, we will start by explaining how exploration works. Exploration is an action that you can take in order to place claims on distant areas. The first thing that you should know is that right from the beginning, every single realm can take an exploration action in order to explore areas that are on any of the distant continents adjacent to their towns. So if, for instance, you were playing in the east, let's say as Muscovy, you would be able to then explore the territories that are on the northeastern and central Asia from your towns. However, the other way to explore also is using your ships, for which you will have to first of all research the quest for the New World idea. That this is what unlocks you the possibility to explore with your ships. So to take the explorer action, you would have to spend 1 diplomatic cube and 1 military cube. And then optionally you may always move one of your ships up to 2 spaces to have him move into the distant continent. So here, as I said, it's a bit advanced game already. Most of my ships are already on the distant continents, but if I wish, I could still move one of them. So let's say, just for the sake of it, we can move this ship in the eastern African coast. As you can see here, we have letter D, and we will move him following the letter D into the Indian Ocean. Once you've moved one of your ships, then all you do is that you roll a die, and in this case, for instance, we have a number 1. So simply enough, the first option that you have is that you can place one of your claims on any empty territory displaying one of those numbers that is, as I said, adjacent to your towns, or if you have the quest for the New World idea, adjacent to your ships. So in this case, for instance, I could choose just to explore New England. Alternatively, if you have rolled a die and the result doesn't have any of these skulls, like for example this one that in number 2 or in number 3, you would also be able to place a claim on any player-controlled town, on any non-player realm province that it was also adjacent to either your towns or your ships. So not rolling a skull will help you place those claims a bit abroad, so not only on the numbered territories, but also on those that already are being populated by distant realms or by other players. If, however, you roll any result that includes a skull, you would have to either pay 1 diplomatic power, or the action itself would fail, and you would also have to destroy one of your light ships on the distant continents. If the dice result that you've rolled, you don't like it, you always have the option to spend 1 more diplomatic power and re-roll, and you can do that twice. So that's basically how exploration works. One thing to note is that if, let's say that I would have chosen India, where there were no claims yet, and I would have placed a claim, it was a 1, so I would have been able to place it on any of the coastal provinces belonging to any of the distant realms. I would also look for any trade cards that are set up aside that include the Indian nodes. As you can see in these cards, on the top left part, you have some numbers that are saying 3, 4, for example, in that one, or here in the T it says 4. Those numbers correspond to the distant continents. As you can see here, India and Arabia is number 3. Whenever you place the first claim in any of those distant continents, you would be checking those cards that on the setup of the scenario are placed on the side, and you would then add them to the trade cards that are on the deck, shuffling out also the discards and making once again the trade deck from the beginning. And then this will tie up to the next action that I'm going to be explaining, that is colonization. So those claims, once you've placed them on the board, at the end of the round will generate colonists. So you will gain 1 colonist per each claim, like these ones, that are colonial claims, meaning that they are placed on top of those empty territories with numbers. So any claims that you would have, for example, this one here, claim number 4, that I have it on a DNPR, or it could be a claim like this one here on the south, where France has a claim on my town, those will not generate any colonists. Only the ones that are placed on empty territories. For each empty territory, at the end of the round, during the income and upkeep, you will be receiving colonists. You can only receive a maximum of 4 per income and upkeep phase, so you can basically keep some from the previous round, but you cannot generate suddenly 7 or 8 or anything like that. With those colonists, you will be able to then take the colonization action. The colonization action is what will allow you to change these claims that you have in the map with towns. In order to do so, you would need to spend either 4 colonists from your colonist pool or 4 administrative power, and you can always mix and match. So you could have 1 colonist left and 3 administrative power, 3 and 1, however you want. The requirement here, that will be similar to what we will be seeing next in trade, is that in order to colonize a province, you will need it to be connected by a line of ships or cities back to your capital. So in this case, I'm playing as Denmark, my capital is here in Copenhagen, and we have a line of ships that is going through Skagerrak, the North Sea, the Norwegian Sea, the Northeastern Atlantic, down into the Northwestern Atlantic, allowing me to then colonize New England. So I would just pay 4 of my colonists, since I was having enough of them, and I would take 1 of my towns to place it in the territory, removing the claim. And that would be what the colonization action would require. Then finally, since it has many things that touch upon colonization and exploration, I thought that I would also tackle trade in this same video. So for trading, you would spend 1 diplomatic power, and then what you're doing is that there is this trade deck that we were talking about. And normally, when you take the trade action, you would draw 3 cards, but there might be some ideas that can allow you to draw an extra card, for instance. And I've cheated a bit. I've selected a few cards that will help us explain the different types of trade that you can do. So similar to colonization, in order to trade, you will need to have a connection back to your capital that can be made by towns, light ships, and in this case also vassals and influence. So first of all, in order to be able to trade, that trade happens in these trade nodes. There are the ones in the sea, the maritime trade nodes, and also inland, like the one here in Saxony, and that is an inland trade node. You would have to be able then to link it back to your capital. So you would draw 3 cards from the top of your deck, and then from those 3 cards you will see that each one of the cards is depicting several trade nodes. So normally it's either 3 or 2 of them. From the 3 cards, you can select any of the trade nodes in which you will be able to trade. So one in which you would be able to reach that trade node. The caveat here is that similarly to the exploration action, when you are selecting a trade node, you will be able also to move one of your ships to either connect that trade node back to your capital or to increase your trade power. Because as you can see in the map, there are these spaces here that are called the trade protection slots that we will see later how they help us, but the more ships that you have in them, the more trade power that you will have. So let's start by explaining the normal trade. We will be selecting, in this case, for instance, Saxony. So as I was saying, in order to trade, you would need to connect back to your capital through ships, through influence, through towns, or through your vassals. So in this case, Saxony, that is located here, it would be connected through my influence and then through my towns or my vassals back to the ships into the trade node. So this would be an eligible trade node. So once you have selected the trade node, you first look if you have any of the key provinces that you own. I currently unfortunately don't own any of them. In that case, you would be able to, if you have not, if you don't have their merchant already, move one of your merchants. So let's say that I could move the one from the trade node in the North Sea into Saxony, and you would activate it by flipping it, and then you would calculate what's your trade power. And your trade power, if it's an inland trade node, and you can see that it's inland because it doesn't have the ship next to the name, would come from the key provinces. Normally you're getting 1 trade power per each key provinces that you own. If they have a plus, that will give you an extra trade power. So let's say that if I owned Praga, I would get 2 trade power. In addition, if you have any merchant, you would also get 1 trade power. So basically, the bare minimum you have 1. In this case, because I only have 1 trade power from the merchant, I would gain 5 ducats. What you're checking here is that the green column is the column that you check if the trade node is not expanded, because there will be cards and there will be events and missions that will allow you to expand the trade nodes to make them more profitable, in which case you would be checking on the right one. So that would be a normal trade inland. Let's see now how it would look like for a naval one. So this was back in the North Sea. So the other node that I had here, for instance, is the North America node with this tobacco. Certain cards that are mostly featuring the distant continents, like this one that has a number 1. So this one, for instance, in this particular scenario, started outside the deck, and it was added once we explored the Americas, because they have the number 1. Some of them will have these requirements that say, in order to be able to trade here, there has to be either a town, a vassal, or a DNPR in any of those 4 key provinces. So it says Virginia, the Great Lakes, Mississippi, and Antilles. So currently we have Virginia, Antilles, and Mississippi that have a town. Great Lakes doesn't have one, but since one of them at least has it, we are able to trade there. So then we look at the key provinces once again, and as I was saying, I own Virginia, which has a plus, so that means that it provides 2 trade power. And I also own Antilles, so that gives me a total of 3. I have a merchant present in the node, which gives me the 4th trade power, and I also happen to have 4 lightships adjacent to the node for a total of 8. So whenever you would be gaining 6 or more trade power, you would be earning 14 ducats. So in the maritime trade nodes, your lightships that are protecting the trade around that trade node will also increase your trade power. Also, if other players are present in the node, like in this case, for instance, France is also there, they would also be able to check if they can connect that trade node back to their capital. So with France, they have here their merchant. They have 1 ship in this location, in this sea zone, and then through B and C, unfortunately, they don't have any ship right now. But let's assume that they had one. In this case, when checking how much trade power they have, they don't have any provinces, but they have a merchant and they have a lightship. So that gives them 2 trade power. So in this case, on top of me earning 14 ducats, they would also earn 6. If by any chance they would have had the same trade power as me, let's say that we both had 8, it's important to note that within each of these rows, only 1 player can trade. And the way it works is that if both players happen to have the same trade power, the player who takes the action, in this case it was me, would break the tiebreaker, pushing the other player down. So once again, if we both had 8 trade power, I would then push France down to the next row, and they would only earn 10. If one of the players within the same row has more trade power than the other, that's the one that will break the tiebreaker. So if, let's say, France had 9 and I had only 8, they would push me down to the 10 ducats bracket, and they would stay in 14. The next thing that I want to show with these examples that I have here is that sometimes you will have here some trade nodes that between brackets they are highlighting what is called a secondary trade node. In the secondary trade nodes, you are allowed to trade if you are able to once again track that connection back to the capital. So in this case, we are talking about Lübeck. However, no matter how much trade power you will be able to generate, so no matter if you actually have 8, 4, or 2, you will only earn the lowest amount possible. So in this case, if I were to trade in Lübeck, even though I have some ships and I would have a merchant, meaning that I would have 3 trade power, I will only earn 4. The rest of the board, they would be able to trade in Krakow as normal. And it's important to know that in order to trade in the secondary trade node, since you are earning only at the bottommost bracket, you need to be the player with the most trade power in there, and also there cannot be any pirates present. I will explain now about the pirates. So for instance, we have here the English channel. So let's say that I select the English channel. I would move one of my ships there and the merchant, so that I have 1, 2, and 3 trade power. So in this example, also England, that they are present, they would have London, Essex, they would have York, but not Antwerp. So they would have 3 trade power. They also have a merchant and 4 ships, meaning that they have 7. I only have 3, so under normal circumstances, they would earn 11, and I would earn 8. However, whenever there is a pirate, the pirates will always push each and every single player that are trying to trade in that trade node down 1 row. So in this case, England, instead of being in the 6+, would be dropped to the 3 to 5, and me, because I'm in the 3 to 5, I would be dropped to the 1 to 2. As I was saying with the secondary nodes, you are only trading there on the bottommost row. So if there would be a pirate there, when I tried to trade in Lübeck, instead of trading, I would not be able to do so because the pirate would drop me from the 1 to 2 down to the 0. If by any chance none of the options were valid for you, or the amount that they are giving you is really low and you'd rather not take that option, you always have what could be said a consolation prize that you can gain 2 ducats in case that you are failing to trade. Trade itself is quite important in the game, and the best way to be successful in trading, similar to how exploration works, is to spread your fleet around. Make sure that you spread also influence on the board in order to be able to target as many trade nodes as possible. For trade, it's also important to understand, since I was explaining in exploration that you are adding new cards as soon as you are exploring the new world, is that the presence in the new world will be really important because it will increase the amount of cards that will be useful for you, but also the trade nodes that are on the distant continents are more valuable because they have trade goods that are much more valuable, as you saw for instance here with the tobacco, that gives much more money than both cloth or salt. So expanding with your exploration actions into the distant continents, colonizing there the provinces that will be of great use for such cards as tobacco, for instance, will help you expand your realm, become larger, gain more prestige, but also will help you with trading. Unfortunately, realms that don't expand into the distant continents will have that disadvantage with the others. That pretty much covers it for the 3 aspects that I wanted to explain today. Of course, there are ideas and action cards that will help you explore the world better, or colonize it, or trade in a better way, and those we can try to check in some other video. I hope you like it. Please share with me some feedback if this is the type of content that you would like to see, and I will see you guys in the next video. Take care.